So we have done with the first part of the business law, the introduction. Remember, in this business law, topic 1, we are required to look at the meaning of law. After the meaning of law, we have to look at the nature of law and the purpose of law. So once you have completed the nature, the purpose of law, also the classification of law, the difference between morality and law, the constitution, and legislation and delegated legislation. I hope we have to start from there because we have done the other part. So we start with the legislation and delegated legislation. So write delegation and delegated legislation and delegated legislation. So you can see it is a combination of several words. It is a combination of several words, which we have delegation, which delegation is what? Giving other responsibility, or you give away your responsibility. You give away your responsibility. So you separate your responsibility and give to another person, to maybe your junior staff. So in this case, we are referring to the lawmaking process. So we know legislation is among the body which makes laws. So legislation is among the body which make laws. Now they delegate this responsibility. To other authority, so that those authority now will make this law on their behalf. So if we define what is a delegated legislation, is that although the legislative authority from the public is vested in parliament, yes. So these people who do law making, or they make laws, so their authority is vested in the what? In the parliament. And we know very well that most of our MPs, they don't have enough time to sit in parliament to make laws. So instead, they delegate this responsibility to other public officer. So what now? The examiner will ask you the reason why parliament delegate the lawmaking process. So now we need to know the reason why parliament delegate the lawmaking power, making power. So what is the reason why the parliament delegated the lawmaking power? So the first one is lack of expertise. Remember, the member of parliament are just the normal people which we have just elected from the society to go and represent us in the parliament. They don't have the experience on the law. They have not gone to the law schools. They are just a civil servant. So because of that lack of expert or that set of skills, then they delegate this responsibility to other party. Another one, inadequate time. We have inadequate time. We all know that most of MPs, they do a lot of politics. They are in the ground doing politics 1 and 2, 3. So they don't have time to sit in parliament and process this law. Another one is that parliament is not always in session, right? Yes. So parliament is not always in session. So you find that the session is normally taking place either 2 days in a week, 2 days in a week. So you find that that will not be enough for these people to make the law. It will not be enough for these people to make the law. So another reason is lack of flexibility. Lack of flexibility. Remember, those MPs, they have been elected in the parliament through their members, through their, like, what do we mean? Through the separate. It is not just a common political party. So they have just been elected through several political party, and when they have gone to, when they go there, you find that each and every MP will try to solve the interest of the what, of their party. So in that case, it will make this law making process being not flexible in terms of changes. Now, after that, we need to look at the characteristic of delegated legislation, or the features, the characteristic or features of delegated responsibility, delegated legislation. So we need to have the features of delegated legislation, the features of delegated legislation. So number one is that all delegated legislation is made under an express or act of parliament. So all delegation or delegated legislation is made through the act of parliament, through the act of parliament. Another one is that it must be consistent with the provision. It must be consistent with the provision of the provision of act of parliament. It must be consistent. It must be consistent with the provision of act of parliament, So it must be consistent with the provision of act of parliament. Another one is that it must be published in the Kenya Gazette. It must be published in the Kenya Gazette. It must be published in the Kenya Gazette. So that makes the end of the characteristic of delegated legislation. So now we need to look at the advantages of this delegated responsibility legislation. It is the responsibility of the member of parliament, but now it is giving away their responsibility to other party. So what could be the advantage? So the advantage here, my good student, we will talk of what? Number one, time. Number one is time. So it saves the parliament time. Yes, so that one, it saves the parliament time to focus on other activities. Number two, the speed, because these they will delegate this legislation or this duty of legislation to the expertise. So this expertise, they have the experience and knowledge, so they know when to start and when to end. So you find that lawmaking process, it will take less time. Another one is a less rigid. Another one characteristic is less rigid. So when we say let rigid, it means this law can be amended or can be adjusted anytime. It can be amended or adjusted anytime. So it stated that delegated legislation can be amended or repeated easily since the process is relatively flexible. Another one is technicality of the subject matter. Another advantage is technicality of the subject matter. Remember that you are delegating this duty to the people who have experience, lawyers. They have expertise. So you find that they will deal with what they know because of what? They have that technical capability. So if you want to explain, you can say technical subject matter is dealt with by the expert in the specific skills, e.g. Made by the local authority to regulate daily activities within the administration area. Also professional bodies make regulation to govern their profession, like the Law Society of Kenya. So they are the one governing their profession. And then if there is advantage, we will not miss disadvantage. If there is advantage, we will not miss disadvantage. So now we have disadvantages of delegated responsibility. Number one is lack of adequate parliamentary control. Because they are not the one making, they are just supervising, overseeing, but they don't take the control of that lawmaking process. Another one is lack of judicial control. So we have said number one is lack of control by parliament. Another one is lack of control by what? This one is by parliament, and this one is by judiciary. Another one is that parliament control of delegated legislation is or you can write this one. Parliament may delegate its lawmaking mandate to the non-elected bodies. So that makes the end of delegated legislation and delegated. It was just one delegated legislation and delegated legislation. Now we can move to something else.